From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that examines the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Be sure to click the button to like, follow, or subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. First up today, we're going to check in with Dr. Apryl Steele, President and CEO of the Denver-based animal welfare organization, the Dumb Friends League. Dr. Steele joined us on Community Catalysts on September 3rd to discuss a groundbreaking initiative that she and her organization helped get on the Colorado November ballot. The measure proposed creating a first-in-the-nation role, the veterinary professional associate, to address the state's veterinary care shortage. Similar to a physician's assistant in human medicine, veterinary PAs would provide expanded services under a licensed veterinarian supervision, increasing access to care statewide. Apryl, welcome back to Community Catalysts, and let's get right to it. How did the election turn out?
It's so good to be here, and I'm thrilled to share that despite a lot of stress, the Proposition 129 passed in Colorado. So it passed 52.8% to 47.2%. And that means we won by 164,568 votes.
Wow, so nearly 3 million votes cast in the state of Colorado. And you won by a small majority, but you still won.
We won.
Congratulations. How are you feeling?
Amazing. I am absolutely blown away that our small, mighty, scrappy, and passionate team made this happen.
So Apryl, while the experience is still fresh in your memory, I want to ask you a few questions about the experience of going through that, okay?
Absolutely.
Look, this kind of advocacy isn't something that most people associate with leading an animal welfare organization. What was it like for you to step into this political role?
It was very challenging for myself and my team to step into this role because we had a picture of what we thought this process would look like, and that is not what this process looked like, especially with the level of attacks and misinformation that were sent our way. We weren't prepared mentally to expect that. So we had to figure out ways to support one another, try to get the good information, the true information out, dispel the fear-mongering. And that was not something we had expected at all.
What I think I just heard you say was this was a good deed, and you were expecting that it was just going to, be universally acclaimed. You were surprised that there was actually opposition.
We knew that the veterinary community, some in the veterinary community felt like this was infringing on their spaces. So we expected there'd be some opposition from the veterinary community, but we had no idea that it would be in the ethical gray zone that it ended up being, and that there would be such a national push for that. So we were prepared to tell the message. We had 80% of the public saying they would support a VPA. We had so many people that have pet owners that were struggling with getting access to care that we knew that it was a consumer-friendly initiative. What we did not know is, A, how hard it is to get on the ballot, how hard it is to get 180,000 signatures, how sketchy that world kind of is. That was a whole new thing for us. And then when we got to the public campaign, we did not expect over $2 million being invested in opposition in our community. We had the sense that it would be more level. So we were outspent 8-1 in that phase of the campaign.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so how much money did you spend on the campaign, and how much did your opposition spend on the campaign?
So overall, the Veterinary Care Coalition group that was the proponent spent about $1.3 million to get it on the ballot and to do the campaign. So it took about $1.1 million to get all the signatures and get on the ballot. So there were in the end, we had a few more gifts. So about $300,000 was available for the public aspect of the campaign. The opposition spent $2.3 million in the public campaign portion of the campaign. So we were way outspent. And the information, there were commercials on mainstream TV that were very dramatic of black and white surgeries with blood dripping off the table saying your animal's going to die if this passes. And, people just want to do what's right for animals. And that was the messaging that was tested by the opposition as resonating, even though it was completely untrue. So we had a much bigger hurdle than we ever imagined we would have.
It seems somehow disproportionate that the level of opposition you faced. Is that because this is the first in the nation effort to do this, and so the opponents to this were thinking that they needed to fight it here because if it passed here, it might spread to other places?
That's exactly correct. And the opponents' funding was 99% the American Veterinary Medical Association. So this wasn't a vast, broad funding base. The proponents' funding was less than 1% from corporate entities, out-of-state corporate entities. So it was very one-sided. The American Veterinary Medical Association knows that once it passes in one state, it's going to blow up in other states. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. And so they spent a lot of money really nationally telling veterinarians across the country that they need to oppose this with weekly email blasts to their entire membership. It was pretty incredible.
Apryl, let me go back a little bit in the process here. How confident did you and the group that wanted to do this, how confident did you have to be ahead of time before making the commitment to proceed? And did you have polling early on that gave you a high indication that this was likely to pass?
We did. So we were confident for a few reasons. One being, this is an issue that everybody's facing. Pet owners are facing every single day, and there are no other solutions out there. And pets are family members. And, that bond that means so much to people can get just as negative when their animal's sick. And this family member that is vital to their well-being gets sick, and they can then not provide care for that animal. It gets to be a very negative impact on their lives. So we knew the need is there. We know the need is there. We knew there was strong messaging in the community about we have to do something. This is not okay. And then our early polling showed 80% of people supported the idea of a veterinary PA, and fewer than 14% opposed the idea, and the rest were undecided. So we had super strong polling. Our pollsters didn't even want to share that because they thought it looked fake. And so we knew we were going in with super strong polling. And when when the Dumb Friends League board of directors agreed to invest significantly in this, it was because we had a real sense of assurance that this was going to pass if we got it on the ballot and let the pet owners speak. It wasn't until we had that strong opposition that way outfunded us that we got worried about it passing.
So that also explains the budgetary priorities here as well, right? You said $1.3 million budget, 1.1 just to get the signatures to get this on the ballot. That left you $200,000, maybe $300,000 for education and outreach. But that was because you believed that, and the polling suggested that people liked the concept of this. They kind of understood it. They understood the need. They understood this was a workable solution, and they were going to run with that. Is that the correct understanding, that you were relying on people's recognizing that this was just a good idea?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you kind of to fast forward here. If someone in another state today were to approach you and ask for advice about how to champion this, or maybe even any other ballot initiative, but especially this, in their own state, what would you tell them now are the keys to success?
So we're actually in the process of putting a toolkit together for other states. I've been approached by leaders in about 20 other states asking, how do we do this? And the governor of Colorado, Governor Polis, has offered to talk to governors in every other states that want to do this. So, the fear of the AVMA, that this would be a wildfire that caught on across the country, is coming true. My advice would be, don't do a ballot measure. So, as much as possible, do it through the legislature. One of the reasons we did a ballot measure was to show that the public wants this. There's a need that needs to be filled that the veterinary profession is not meeting. And we hope to inspire more generous conversation at the legislative level on both sides, because the threat of a ballot measure is there, and we've shown it can be successful. So my advice would be to move forward legislatively as much as possible, not to have to invest the millions of dollars that could be used for other things in access to veterinary care, and to realize that the public's a really strong advocate. My other advice would be be ready to be attacked, and be ready for those attacks to be unfair, and figure out what your strategy is to keep your sanity.
Apryl, the last question I want to ask you kind of goes back to, in this podcast, how I always ask about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there's kind of three little parts to this. You've taken on a challenge at a magnitude that, has to have been both exciting, but also personally daunting. And I'm curious if I could ask you just to share an example, first, of something good, a moment in the process of this that kept you motivated, made you feel like you were really doing something that was worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, most of the good has happened now that it's passed, and I am getting reached out to by people across the country that are saying, finally, there's hope. There's hope for this issue that we're struggling with so hard. Along the way, there were some bright spots of veterinarians willing to step up and do interviews and write op-eds and do social media posts in favor. And so I got to see that, yeah, there are a big part there's a big portion of the veterinary community that actually really does support this and is looking outside of this fear bubble. So those were the bright spots.
So let me ask you the something bad, an example in the course of this process, a tough challenge that you had to overcome.
I think the bad was this was motivated by animal welfare, by preventing suffering. And to be attacked and accused of wanting to create harm and that was the intent of this was incredibly offensive and sad for everyone working on it.
I'm going to ask you the something ugly, and I'm wondering if there's an unexpected or a particularly difficult experience that taught you a lesson that you're going to remember for a long time.
Two things come to mind. One is there was on one news station, a reporter that did kind of an attack piece that was also very untrue and misleading, and it was dramatic and it was an investigative report, but it wasn't done with ethics. And I thought that was very ugly. Luckily, it was minimized and didn't catch on. I think the other ugly thing, and the thing that I feel like we have to heal, is the division that has been created between animal welfare and the veterinary profession through this process. And there should be no division. We should be all advocating for the exact same things, which is the health and well-being of animals and the people that care for them. We need to fix that division.
Apryl, if I check back with you in 5 years, 10 years even, what do you expect will be the difference in Colorado as a result of this work?
I think the difference in Colorado will be that there's hundreds of veterinary PAs providing relationship-centered care to hundreds of thousands of animals, but not only in Colorado, but millions of animals across the country. I have no doubt that it's going to become the norm nationwide.
Dr. Apryl Steele, thank you again for sharing your journey with us, and championing such a groundbreaking initiative is no small feat. And I have to just tell you, I admire your dedication, your resilience, your creative leadership, and not just about getting the measure on the ballot and getting it passed, but in affecting communities throughout Colorado and setting an example that will surely inspire others nationwide. So congratulations to you, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Matt.
And if you want to know more, catch my full interview with Dr. Apryl Steele on the Community Catalysts episode from September 3rd, 2024. Dr. Apryl Steele's leadership demonstrated the courage to advocate for a groundbreaking initiative that required building public understanding and support for a complex and innovative solution. Shifting gears, our next guest, Councilman Jim Torgeson, faced a very different leadership challenge, one rooted in confronting the difficult realities of governance when ideological convictions conflict with a community's practical needs. Gilbert, Arizona, a thriving suburb of Metro Phoenix with over 280,000 residents, has experienced rapid growth and increasing pressure on its infrastructure and services. Midway through his first term on the town council, Councilmember Torgeson, long a staunch advocate for low taxes, limited government, and controlled growth, made the difficult decision to support increases to the town's sales, use, and bed taxes to address critical needs. His choice reflects a leadership approach that prioritizes responsibility and community well-being over ideological purity. I'm eager to explore what led to his pivotal decision and the broader lessons it offers for leaders everywhere. Jim Torgeson, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Well, thank you for having me, sir.
Hey, Jim, you've described the decision to prioritize the community's needs over ideology as an eye-opening realization. Can you just kind of take us back to the moment when you realized that there needed to be a shift and what that meant for you personally?
Well, the problem for me, and you just started talking about the growth of Gilbert. And for 10 years, Gilbert was hands down the fastest growing community in the country. just since you checked your stats, the new stats came in, we're at 292,711 residents.
Wow.
It's growing. And there are things that are in place that need to be put in place even further. There are projects, streets, roads, etc. In order to get there and to maintain the quality of life that Gilbert has been accustomed to. The reason I moved to Gilbert, the best streets, parks, police, fire, we're all great. But we have had a long-standing position of having the best service at the lowest cost. And that's something very admirable and something as a conservative you can be very proud of. But the harsh realities of inflation, generally across the country, but especially in Arizona, construction costs rose by 88% over the last 4 years. That's far outpacing CPI. It's far outpacing breadbasket inflation. It's nearly double. For instance, concrete 5 years ago was $25 a yard. Right now, it's averaging $150 a yard. That's a 600% increase. Well, people can complain that, why are you charging me more? And sales tax is adjusted for inflation, but it's not. Because sales tax didn't go up 88% like the main things we pay for did. And I had to sit and look at everything we were doing, and some things that were toned down, some things were put off for a while. But the fact of the matter is our town, as livable as it is, as envious as people are in Arizona and across the country of this quality of life, we were at number 100 out of the top 100 municipalities in the country. We were the bottom one for parks. The reason most of the families moved to Gilbert was for their children and the safety and the parks and the community. Yet we were now at the bottom. And we had held such an ideologically pure torch to the feet of finance on this that we'd come to the bottom. We had also seen that infrastructure that was paid for 20 years ago was not lasting its 45 to 50 year life expectancy, but only 20. And we were having to repair things early. And then finally, our conservative legislature had made moves, which I believe ideologically I agree with. They didn't like rental tax. So they took rental tax away. But rental tax for 2025 was projected to be $9.1 million of our budget.
And this is for Gilbert to be able to get a rental tax off of properties in the town of Gilbert.
Right. Every town of Gilbert property that was rented paid a 2.1% rental tax. Well, that's gone now because the state legislature made it illegal to have a rental tax. You take $9 million out of a budget of although some people refuse to believe anything's run well, a very well-run organization, at least as well-run as government can be run, because we can all be contemptuous of government. It costs more. Mm-hmm. But you take $9 million out of there. They also had redone state shared revenues so that we lacked approximately, coming into this year, $20 million of funds that were expected. Well, we're down $29 million. Everybody's cheering the state, but the state took it from the town. And we're now looking at a hole that needs to be filled. And quite seriously, the only way to do it without compromising our individual homes with more bonds and putting basically a mortgage on each house was to instill an extra property tax that is more fair, or an extra sales tax of 0.5% that's more fair, because at least the tourists that are coming are paying their fair share.
So, Jim, I want to ask you about this. I'm going to come back to what the alternatives were, but I've had the privilege of working with the town council in Gilbert now for over a year, and I happened to be in the audience when the town council considered the sales tax increase. And I wonder if you remember exactly what the words were that you said from the dais. I think what I actually heard you say was that you were the most conservative person by far, but you weren't going to let your ideology get in the way of what was necessary for the community.
Oh, yeah. No, you absolutely. Absolutely. You said I was not going to virtue signal conservatism over what was good for the people.
So let's break that down a little bit. Jim, how conservative are you? I mean, how do we understand what it means from your perspective to be a conservative when you were elected to office just 2 years ago?
Well, it meant that I wanted to diminish the footprint of government as much as possible. Things that we shouldn't be involved in, we're not involved in. The base thought is to be as anti-tax as you can be. You know, all taxes are bad. But the fact of the matter is that it turned to be the best steward of the tax dollar I could possibly be, to make sure that what was taken was spent as well as it could be, that hopefully we could limit programs that maybe shouldn't exist, but that everything that came in was executed as well as possible.
What do you think's changed in the last 2 years that most got you to the point of understanding the necessity behind this?
Well, I do believe that most of our staff, and I'll say all because there's no one I can point out that's a negative, I believe they have a great deal of pride in their work. I believe that they do want to do the best job. I don't believe any of them are nefariously out there trying to overspend money. At the same time, I do understand there's problems in acquisition and contracting for municipalities that a private business wouldn't have to adhere to. There are rules, regulations. You take a federal dollar, you have to go down this program, et cetera. And knowing a little bit more about that has softened a little bit of that edge. And it's also made me understand no matter what happens, the government will cost more to operate because it has more rules enforced and regulations enforced upon it. So we don't quite get what the average man, the average woman, business person would consider the fiscally best option almost ever. But we've got to do the best that we can with what we have to work with. And what we have to work with has layers like an onion that you don't get to peel all the layers back. You can peel a few, but in the end, there are things that even local government has to deal with that the average person doesn't. And that hole in your roof, you can decide not to patch that during a winter and accept the rain. But if I'm responsible for it and there's a hole in the roof and the rain's coming down on you, you're losing your ever-loving mind if I don't fix the roof immediately, regardless of what it costs.
Jim, there are people in your community who voted you into office understanding your conservative credentials, and I'm wondering how they've responded to the decision you've made to increase the sales tax, use tax, and bed tax. And, are they applauding your sense of responsibility here, or are you getting some heat from people who have a anti-tax ideology?
I'm absolutely taking heat from some people, and some of them know better. Former council people, things like that know better. And they're griefing me so they can be ideologically pure. Some people understand it. And especially if I've had an opportunity to explain, I don't see an option with this kind of inflation that we're facing, this crushing burden. I don't see any other way to keep us at an A level unless I do this. If things change, I'll be the first person to ask for a reduction. But many people do understand it. I've shared the town budget with people. No one found anything of substance to cut. They need to understand that we really did need to do this. There wasn't a choice in the matter because the choice was your quality of life. The choice was your potholes, your police, different things that are funded out of that. And I would be lying to people if I went ahead and took advantage of that vote imbalance, which initially it was 6-1 with everybody concerned I was not going to vote for it.
Jim, I want to go back and ask you, you talked before about how the state legislature stopped allowing cities to collect the rental tax and what the consequences were on the town of Gilbert's budget. I'm just wondering, how has this experience shaped your thinking about the relationship between state policies and local governance?
Well, I think when the direct impact is at the municipal level, there ought to be a little bit more communication, a little bit more respect for what they've done, because in a lot of ways, the state has decided they're going to run the municipalities from the state level. You're not going to do this, you're going to do that. I've discovered different things even over our trash systems, waste systems, policies put in place. They didn't know what they were doing, but they thought they were making a great decision. And the amount of money that it affects on a municipal level. And it's unfunded mandates. We just have to deal with it. I'm disappointed that a lot of the time it feels like the state legislature takes the win by taking money from the municipality. They have a big win. Yay, we cut this tax. Except the municipality now has to find how to make up for that. And then they credit that, and I watched it happen to me by a state legislator, by saying, oh, well, they're just going to raise your taxes. Well, yeah, you just took all that tax money away. And now I don't have enough to finish piping, whatever it is. There was no, how do we keep the municipality whole? They didn't care. They just didn't care.
Hey, Jim, do you have any advice for elected municipal leaders in other cities and towns who have to balance their own ideological commitments versus the practical needs of their community? What have you learned from this that you would share with your peers nationally?
I would say follow my lead, because at the end of the day, you're not doing your job if you're just sticking to a book. If you're sticking to something so pure that it ignores actually doing the job you were elected to do, don't run for the office. Do what you think the right thing is. That doesn't mean abandon your base point, but it does mean you're supposed to be running a municipality. You're on a board of directors. You're representing more than just, the 53,000 people that voted for you instead of 47 or whoever lost. You're representing 292,000 people.
Do you think your position was courageous?
I didn't view it that way. I viewed it as hard, though. I viewed it as humbling.
I remember the words you said. I heard you say, "This sucks."
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I told you in response as well, which was that I thought that the choice that you made and your willingness to speak up candidly about that, I told you that I thought it was heroic. And I still believe that, Jim. And I think that to be a principled conservative and then to take a stance that says, this is necessary and that I'm not going to let my ideology get in front of what's necessary. I think for a lot of people that should be inspirational and instructive. And I'm grateful to you for opening up to me and letting me share this story with your colleagues nationally. I think it's a very important example.
I appreciate it, because when you use that word with me, it did give me a little affirmation, let's say. It did feel good to hear it. It felt a little awkward, I think. But the fact of the matter is that, I looked at it and I would hope whoever votes for me or anyone else or whoever runs has the backbone to be able to say, I have to let this go. And as unpalatable as it is, and the blowback that I get, and to be frank, the friends that I've lost, I have people that will not speak to me now. I was willing to do that because it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I don't want somebody representing me that can't get out of their own way to do the right thing. And we all have different definitions. But at the end of the day, the right thing was making sure that the quality of life and the service level and the integrity of what makes Gilbert was left whole after that vote. And if people want to slag me further, which I get slagged, like I told you, stupid memes and stuff, okay. But maybe in the end, other people look and go, He's actually reasonable. He makes sense. He did that. And maybe when he asks to take half a cent off the sales tax, maybe we should do it because he's considered it. Maybe when he asks us to never ask for secondary property taxes, we can do it. Maybe they'll trust me to make a right vote that disagrees with them. You know, I can only hope that in the end, people look and go, he believed he was doing the right thing. Time will tell if I did, but at least I want people to know that I feel I did the right thing for them. The 10% of my group that thinks I'm Satan now, they shouldn't control 100% of Gilbert. And threatening me with running candidates against me, threatening me with stupid political things, censure, recall. Guys, that's not how you build a team.
It occurs to me that you're also proceeding with the expectation that the public is going to respect the reasonability of the decision that you made, that you were acting in good faith for the town.
I hope they do. And if they don't, I understand. Because not everybody can get as deep into the weeds as I have to look at what we had to deal with. And if people don't understand and don't support me because they couldn't spend that time, that's fine. And if it causes me not to run again, okay, I've done what I think I can do. If it causes me to run and I lose because of it, that's okay also. But I'm not gonna do something disingenuous up there. I promise to be truthful and transparent. And as much as it pains me, I had to do that.
Jim, before I let you go, would you let me ask you a few lightning round questions in which we just get to know you a little bit better, and I'm going to challenge you to answer these questions in one sentence or less?
As long as I don't end up in jail, I'm good.
Jim Torgeson, describe your leadership style in just 3 words.
Honest, thoughtful, blatant.
Jim, for a first-time visitor to Gilbert, Arizona, what's one experience they absolutely shouldn't miss?
I would say the downtown, the Heritage District, because it really gives you a feel of what made Gilbert.
Jim, what's the best leadership advice you ever received?
I'm going to drop a name here. Ted Turner. I had lost a business years ago because of my partner making a bad call on something. I don't want to get into the ugliness of it. He was accused of something he didn't do. And I was struggling because I lost millions for something I didn't do. And Ted turned to me, you know, Jim, I don't care who it up. I care about who fixes it. That's what I want around me. People that fix ups. Be that guy. And that was very important because I realized at that moment, it didn't matter who made the mistake in something. It matters how you fix it. Somebody made a mistake in my life that was, from that end of things, irreparable. But I was in charge of fixing the future of my life. And that man's a great man. And he has a lot of knowledge and a lot of good perspective to share with people. I hope people someday recognize what a great man he is.
How do you recharge during challenging times?
I play guitar a lot.
Jim Torgeson, if you could spend 1 hour in conversation with any leader, past or present, who would you pick, and what is one question that you would ask them?
This sounds pretty strange. Jesus. And the question, why? There's so many injustices in the world. There's so many things that are wrong, so many tragedies. Why?
Jim, imagine that you could send a 1-sentence message to yourself back in time, and it would arrive just before you took the oath of office to your term on town council 2 years ago. What's the 1-sentence message you would send to yourself?
Well, one side of me wants to say, don't do it. Right? The other side is do what you think is right. That's the biggest thing I've gotten out of all of us, is do what I think is right.
Last question. In these divisive and challenging times, what is something that makes you optimistic for the future?
You know, sadly, I discussed this with my partner. I discussed it with a lot of, at times, I'm not very hopeful. because I feel that people spend more time angry than connecting. And what makes me hopeful is when I see just really honest interactions like kids with dogs, just that there's still a vibrant youth out there. Not that they're going to solve our problems, because they're not. But that there's hope that we can all look for the enjoyable things in life, that we can be positive, and when you look on like my social media, I've toned it way down because I don't need the aggravation. And half the time you see me putting up puppies and little baby apes and silly things like that, because it's the innocence, the joy of it, the fun of it. And hopefully, a lot of people are disengaging from social media. I guess that would be the hope, that they re-engage with real people. And I think when you're forced to sit across the table from somebody, that you look for what you have in common, rather than sitting in front of a keyboard looking for how to cut them up.
Jim Torgeson, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's been great to visit with you. I really appreciate your opening up about this. I know that it sucks, but I also know that there was something really important in the experience you just had. I'm really grateful for you sharing it.
Well, I hope that I was able to verbalize it in a way that not just people understood, but conveyed what the genuine nature of what I felt. And I hope that somebody does get something out of it, because you have to look, and at the end of the day, let's just say I do one term. At the end of the day, I want to be able to say those 4 years I did something, I did some good and I did it right. I don't want to say that I did it just to act like I was more conservative than the next guy. I want to be able to say I did my best, and hopefully people go, hey, he was all right. He didn't suck.
A heartfelt thank you to Councilmember Jim Torgeson of the town of Gilbert for opening up about his leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing Community Catalysts on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your support helps others discover the show. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. And if you or someone you know has a story of community leadership that would be a great fit for a future episode, let's connect. Click the podcast guest link in the program notes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.